Hello, and a very warm welcome to the NCSI e-Education series. I am Dr. Priya, and with me is Dr. Ajas. We bring you the sixth and the final episode on the 2026 Stroke Guidelines by AHA and ASA Association. In today's segment, we focus exclusively on the in-hospital management of the acute complications of acute ischemic stroke. We will walk you through the guideline recommendations so that you can directly translate them into your bedside practice. So let's begin.
Hello all. Thank you ma'am for the generous introduction. Now starting with the general recommendation on brain swelling, there is class 1 recommendation with level of evidence CEO, which states that in patients with large cerebral or cerebellar infarction at high risk for developing brain swelling and herniation, an early discussion of care option and possible outcome should take place with the patient, if feasible, and family or next of kin to ascertain patient-centered preferences in shared decision making, especially during prognosis formation and when considering intervention or limitation in care.
Brain swelling in patients with large cerebral or cerebellar infarction can cause major and life-threatening complications. Although less severe swelling can be managed medically, decompressive surgery is effective in reducing mortality in cases of severe brain swelling. Nevertheless, there is evidence that persistent morbidity is common. Therefore, a discussion with the patient or next of a kin about the potential benefit of intervention and the overall prognosis with or without these interventions can help ascertain patient-centered preferences in shared decision making, especially during prognosis formation and when considering the interventions or limitations of care.
The another class 1 recommendation is in patient with large cerebral or cerebellar infarction, close monitoring of the patient for the sign of neurological worsening during the first days after stroke is recommended to rapidly evaluate the need for the potential intervention.
A study by Qureshi et al. Found that nearly 70% of the neurological deterioration occurred in the first 48 hours from the ischemic stroke, and only 6% occurred on day 6 or afterwards. Therefore, in patients with large cerebral or cerebellar infarctions, close neurological monitoring is crucial in the first few days to detect neurological deterioration from cerebral edema and evaluate the need for potential interventions.
Another class 1 recommendation with level of evidence CLD states that in patients with large cerebral or cerebellar infarction who are at increased risk for malignant brain swelling, early transfer to an institute with appropriate neurosurgical and critical care expertise is recommended to ensure timely treatment.
A number of studies have found that in patients with brain swelling due to large hemispheric or cerebellar infarction, decompressive surgery within 48 hours is effective in reducing the mortality in cases of severe brain swelling. Additionally, a retrospective study showed that the patients who underwent decompressive craniectomy beyond that 72 hours had the increased odds of poor outcome at discharge. Therefore, it is recommended that the patients with large cerebral or cerebellar infarctions at risk of malignant brain swelling be cared at an institution with the neurosurgical and critical care expertise. The knowledge gaps identified were the identification of the group of patients at risk of brain swelling who might benefit from transfer to facilities with neurosurgical and critical care expertise is essential, and also the optimal duration of intensive neurological monitoring in such patients at risk for brain swelling needs to be determined.
Now coming to the medical management regarding brain swelling, the class of recommendation 2A states that in patients with large cerebral or cerebellar infarction and neurological decline from brain swelling, the use of osmotic therapy as bridge to a surgical intervention is reasonable to improve functional outcome and reduce mortality.
Several non-randomized studies in patients with cerebral edema from large ischemic or other causes have shown that the use of osmotic therapy, either using mannitol or hypertonic saline, was associated with a reduction in the intracranial pressure.
Now another class 3 recommendation showing no benefit states that in patients with large hemispheric infarction 18 to 70 years of age, the use of IV glibenclamide does not result in improved functional outcome and is not recommended.
This recommendation is based on the results of the CHARM trial, in which 535 patients with acute ischemic stroke who were at risk for cerebral edema were randomized to receive IV glibenclamide versus placebo. This trial showed that IV glibenclamide did not improve MRI score at 90 days.
The next class 3 recommendation, documenting harm, states that in patients with large cerebral or cerebral infarction and brain swelling, hypothermia, barbiturates, or corticosteroids should not be administered to treat brain swelling due to lack of evidence of efficacy and potential of increased adverse effects.
A meta-analysis of 6 RCTs demonstrated that the use of hypothermia as a neuroprotecting agent in patients with ischemic stroke was not associated with improved functional outcome, but rather increased odds of pneumonia. Talking about barbiturates, a single-arm retrospective study of 60 patients treated with barbiturate therapy for increased ICP due to large hemispheric infarct showed a reduction of ICP in nearly 80% of the patients, but only 6% of the patients survived. And several studies investigating the use of corticosteroids in patients with ischemic stroke showed no clinical benefit, but rather increased infectious complications. The knowledge gaps and future directions include a comparison of the safety and efficacy of mannitol and hypertonic saline in patients with brain swelling is required, and the optimal duration of brief hyperventilation in patients with brain swelling should be determined.
Now coming to the surgical management for supratentorial infarction, the class 2A recommendations are in patients with large territorial cerebral infarction at high risk for developing brain swelling and herniation, decreased level of consciousness attributed to brain swelling is a reasonable trigger for decompressive hemicranectomy selection.
The pooled results and analysis of several RCTs investigating early decompressive cranectomy versus medical management of cerebral edema after MC infarction demonstrated significant reduction in mortality when the cranectomy was performed within 48 hours of infarction.
Another class 1 recommendation states that in patients less than equal to 60 years of age with unilateral MCA infarction who deteriorates neurologically within 48 hours from brain swelling despite medical therapy, decompressive cranectomy with dural expansion is beneficial to reduce mortality and improve functional outcome.
A plethora of RCTs, including Decimal, Destiny, Hamlet, Headfirst, and Hemi trials, have established that early surgical decompression within 48 hours results in statistically significant benefit of survival and functional recovery in patients aged less than 60 years. Subsequently, several systematic reviews and meta-analyses have also confirmed the same.
The 2B recommendations are in patients with more than 60 years of age with unilateral MCA infarction who deteriorates neurologically within 48 hours from brain swelling despite medical therapy, decompressive cranectomy with dural expansion may be considered to reduce mortality.
Now, talking about the patients aged more than 60 years, Destiny 2 trial found that even in patients who were operated within 48 hours of stroke onset, there was a twofold reduction in the mortality. However, the functional outcome seemed to be worse in this age group. Subsequently, a meta-analysis including 9 RCTs showed that in patients more than 60 years of age, decompressive hemicranectomy within 48 hours led to statistically significant increase in survival rate, but yet failed to show any significance in favorable functional recovery.
Another class 2B recommendation stating that in patients with AIS who received IV TPA thrombolysis and developed malignant cerebral edema despite medical therapy, early decompressive cranectomy within 48 hours may still be considered without additional safety concerns.
A post-hoc analysis of enchanted RCT showed that the administration of IV TPA does not affect patient outcome or mortality. A systematic review of 4 studies who underwent decompressive surgery for malignant edema after TPA administration also showed that IV TPA does not affect mortality, functional outcome, or hemorrhagic complications. Future research is needed regarding the role of early surgical decompression in improving functional outcome in patients aged more than 60 years, finding the optimal triggers for decompressive cranectomy, whether it has to be radiographic or clinical, and to find the effect of a combination of medical osmotic therapy and surgical decompression.
Now talking about the surgical management in cerebral infarction, class 1 recommendation is in patients with cerebral infarction and obstructive hydrocephalus, ventriculostomy is recommended to improve neurological function and decrease mortality. Concomitant or subsequent decompressive cranectomy may or may not be necessary on the basis of factors such as size of infarction, neurological condition, degree of brainstem compression, and effectiveness of medical management.
Studies have found ventriculostomy as an effective treatment for the management of acute obstructive hydrocephalus, even among the patients with acute cerebellar infarction. If CSF diversion by ventriculostomy fails to improve the neurological function, decompressive suboccipital craniectomy should be performed. The risk of upward herniation can be minimized with a conservative CSF drainage or subsequent decompression if the cerebellar infarction causes significant swelling and mass effect.
There is another class 1 recommendation which states that in patients with cerebral infarction causing neurological deterioration from brainstem compression of volume more than equal to 35 ml, decompressive suboccipital cranectomy with dural expansion should be performed to improve outcome and decrease mortality.
Decompressive cerebellar cranectomy is indicated as a therapeutic intervention in cases of neurological deterioration caused by swelling due to cerebellar infarction not able to be managed with medical therapy or ventriculostomy. Surgical intervention leads to significant differences in mortality and functional outcome. A study has also found that in patients with cerebellar infarct volume of more than 35 ml, surgery has led to a significant improvement in the favorable outcomes.
The knowledge gaps include that there is no universal definition of swelling and/or infarct volume available to support a decision for surgery. Also, there are no rigorous studies that examine surgical technique, including the size and location of cranectomy and the use of expansile duroplasty versus the dural substitute.
Coming to the recommendation regarding seizures, the class 1 recommendation is in adult patient with unprovoked seizures after AIS, management that includes anti-seizure medication is recommended on the basis of specific patient characteristic to reduce the risk of seizure recurrence.
Given the lack of high-quality evidence to support specific anti-seizure medication choice, the selection should be based on patient-specific factors that include potential for drug interactions and adverse effects. The duration of the anti-seizure medication therapy should also be individualized to each patient.
The class 3 recommendation showing no benefit mentioned that in adult patient with AIS, prophylactic treatment with anti-seizure medication is not recommended to prevent seizure or improve functional outcome.
There is insufficient evidence to evaluate the effectiveness of prophylactic anti-seizure medication to prevent post-stroke seizure or improve functional recovery after stroke.
The knowledge gaps include, for unprovoked seizures that occur after acute ischemic period, the comparative effectiveness of different anti-seizure medications and the appropriate duration of the therapy are unknown. Also, the role of prophylactic anti-seizure medications might be different in children because of their higher risk of seizures and still needs to be studied.
With this, we conclude the episode 6 of NCSIE Education Stroke Guidelines.
Thank you all for your patience listening.
Thank you.